He deleted an entire year of my work with one smug click, looked me straight in the eye and said, "This was garbage anyway." I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just stared at the empty project folder, felt something inside me snap back into place, and quietly said, "Thank you." He thought I was thanking him for feedback. I was thanking him for freeing me. For 12 months I had built that system, late nights, skipped weekends, debugging sessions that felt like trench warfare. It was our operations overhaul, the one the company bragged about in investor meetings even though they didn't understand a tenth of what it did. My supervisor, Todd, hated that I was the one leading the project. Hated that the executives asked me questions. Hated that I had become the de facto architect while he was still trying to figure out how to filter columns in Excel. He had been waiting for the perfect moment to swing at me. And he found it. When I walked in Monday morning, the repo was empty. My documentation was gone. My local backups were mysteriously corrupted. Only one person had the admin override privileges to wipe the entire directory. Todd. He stood behind me, arms crossed, fake sympathy plastered on his face like a discount sticker. "Maybe next time you'll build something that actually works," he said. "We need elite contributors, not whatever this was." I turned my monitor off. "Are you sure you deleted everything?" I asked. He snorted. "Yes. Permanently." "Good," I said, grabbing my coat. "Then we're done here." I walked out before he could respond. 2 hours later, I was sitting at a cafe, sipping burnt coffee, finally letting the anger settle into clarity. Todd thought he had destroyed my leverage, but he didn't realize the system wasn't just code. It was my design. My diagrams. My architecture. My formulas. My workflow logic. My audit mapping. My integrations. It lived in my head more than it ever lived in their server. They didn't own it. They never did. So I updated my portfolio, polished a few diagrams I had created at home, added a case study, and quietly pushed my resume out to 3 companies. By Friday, I had 9 interview requests. One of them, a mid-sized logistics firm, had been trying to build a nearly identical system for a year and failing miserably. They flew me out the next Monday. I presented the architecture Todd had just erased. I showed them the efficiency gains, the automation model, the predictive engine, the cost savings structure. They didn't blink. They didn't hesitate. They didn't ask me to prove ownership because everything in the demo was built during personal Randy time, my laptop, my accounts. At the end of the meeting, their COO leaned forward and said, "Name your salary." I stayed calm, though inside I was laughing. I gave them a number I thought was high. They countered by adding $60,000 more and a $125,000 signing bonus. The total package, $285,000. I accepted on the spot. Meanwhile, back at my old job, chaos had erupted. Todd hadn't expected that deleting my work meant deleting the only functioning version of the system. They didn't have backups. They didn't have documentation. They didn't even have a printout. Everything was gone. The executives demanded Todd recreate it. He said he could. He couldn't. By week 3, he panicked and told them I must have sabotaged the project before leaving. They investigated. IT logs showed he was the one who wiped the drive. He was marched out of the building before lunchtime. The company tried to recreate my system through contractors. It failed so badly the project was permanently shelved. They lost 2 clients who had been waiting for the upgrade. The CEO sent out a memo about unexpected setbacks. I saw it circulating on LinkedIn. I smiled. Yesterday, my new employer announced I'll be leading a 6-person team to build the next generation of the system I designed, this time with full ownership, my way, and with a team that actually respects my work. Todd destroyed my code, thinking he was destroying me. Instead, he deleted the last thing tying me to a place that didn't deserve me. And now, I'm building something bigger, smarter, and finally mine. 3 months into my new role, I was sitting in a glass-walled office overlooking a floor full of engineers actually excited to work, something I hadn't seen in years, when an email notification popped up on my phone. Subject: request for consultation, urgent. The sender? A junior VP from my old company. I almost laughed. Curious, I opened it. The message was painfully polite, almost desperate. "Hi, we're reaching out because we're having difficulty rebuilding the operations system you previously developed. We'd appreciate your availability for a paid consultation. Please let us know your hourly rate and earliest time you can assist." No mention of Todd. No apology. Just corporate panic wrapped in fake courtesy. I forwarded it to my COO, mostly out of amusement. She read it, smirked, and said, "Want to respond?" "Oh, absolutely," I said. I wrote back, "My consultation rate is $1,200 per hour with a 40-hour minimum. Payment up front. And I retain full architectural ownership of any work I do for you." I hit send, leaned back, and savored the moment. 20 minutes later, my email pinged again. This time from the same VP. "We were not expecting such a rate. We'll get back to you." They never did. They couldn't afford it. Not financially they could. But they couldn't afford the humiliation of admitting they had fired the only person who understood how their own infrastructure worked. Meanwhile, my life had transformed. My team, 6 engineers who were sharp, curious, and unusually collaborative, started calling my architecture the Renaissance build, because you resurrected a dead industry workflow. Their words, not mine. We launched version 1 in record time. It was clean, fast, scalable, and completely ours. The COO pulled me into her office after the rollout. "You know," she said, "our competitors are still trying to mimic that older system of yours." "I'm aware," I said, trying not to grin. "They'll never catch up," she added. "The original was ahead of its time. This one is years beyond that." For the first time in my career, I felt valued. Not tolerated for my expertise. Not exploited for free overtime. Valued. That night, on my way to the parking lot, I checked LinkedIn and saw the ultimate cherry on top. Todd had updated his job title to independent consultant. Translation: he wasn't getting hired anywhere. And knowing how small our industry is, how reputations travel faster than data packets, I also knew he never would. On my drive home, windows down, night air cool against my face, something settled in me, something I hadn't felt in years. Not bitterness. Not pride. Not even vindication. Closure. Because sometimes revenge isn't about burning the other person down. Sometimes it's simply rising somewhere they can't reach. Todd thought deleting my work would erase me. Instead, it erased him. And I finally became everything he tried to bury. A few weeks later, I was invited to speak at a regional tech summit, a small one, nothing glamorous, but the kind where real builders show up, not executives in overpriced suits pretending to understand buzzwords. I gave a talk on system resilience, data redundancy, and architectural foresight, the very principles that would have prevented Todd from destroying a year of work in the first place. Afterward, a line formed. Students. Engineers. CTOs from mid-sized companies. People asking questions, wanting insights, handing me business cards. Then I saw a familiar face in the back of the room. Not Todd. Worse. It was the director of operations from my old company, The one who fully supported Todd's decision to delete a year's worth of my work, back when she thought it made her look decisive. She waited until the crowd thinned, then approached with an awkward half-smile. "That was an excellent presentation," she said. "Really sharp. You've clearly grown since you left." I raised an eyebrow. "Since I left, or since Todd imploded the entire project?" She winced, then laughed a brittle little laugh. "You heard about that?" "Oh, I heard everything," I said. "The industry talks." She shifted her weight, dropping her voice to something almost pleading. "We are still struggling to rebuild what you created. If you ever consider consulting at a more reasonable rate, we'd love to reconnect." I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Instead, I smiled politely and said, "I'm busy building something better," and walked away. But the real twist came 2 days later. My COO summoned me to a meeting with the board. I thought it was something routine. Instead, they showed me projections, big ones. Our new system, the one my team and I had built from scratch, had caught the attention of 2 Fortune 500 companies. They wanted exclusivity. They wanted licensing. And they wanted to move fast. "We think it's time to formalize your leadership role," the board chair said. "Effective immediately, we'd like you to lead an entire division." A division. Not a team. A division. And then she slid a folder across the table. Inside was a compensation package that made my old salary look like pocket change. Equity. Bonuses. Creative control. The kind of offer you don't just accept, you earn. I didn't sign right away. Not to play hardball. Not for drama. But because I wanted a moment to appreciate how far I'd come from the day Todd wiped my work and smirked like he'd done something brilliant. Later that night, sitting in my apartment with the city lights flickering outside the window, I opened the folder again. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was evolution. I signed the contract. The next morning, I got a message from a former coworker, someone who stayed in contact quietly, watching the old company fall further into disarray. He sent a screenshot, a company-wide email announcing that Todd was suing the company for wrongful termination. The comments beneath from employees were brutal. Nobody defended him. Nobody sympathized. It was like the entire building had agreed he was the architect of his own destruction. I stared at the screenshot for a long moment, then typed back, "Let him fight. He's the only one who still doesn't understand he lost long ago." My coworker replied with a laughing emoji. That evening, I walked out of my new office, my division's office now, and paused in the hall, looking at the nameplate they had just put up beside the door. Director of Systems Innovation, a title that meant something. A role that wasn't built on overwork or exploitation. A future I had created by refusing to shrink for people who benefited from my silence. Todd erased a year of my work. But I rebuilt my entire life. And as it turns out, that was the one project he never had the power to delete. A month later, just as things were settling into a new rhythm, the universe decided to hand me one last piece of closure, wrapped in irony so perfect I could never have scripted it. I was having lunch with a few engineers from my team when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. 3 calls in a row. Finally, I stepped outside to take it. The voice on the other end was shaky, strained, and painfully familiar. "Todd." For a moment, I said nothing. Just listened to him breathe like he'd sprinted between disasters. "Hi," he stammered. I know this is unexpected. I got your number from a mutual contact. Which one?" I asked calmly. He hesitated. "Doesn't matter. Listen, I need help." There it was. The thing I never thought I'd hear. I'm consulting for a company, he continued, and they're expecting a system like the one you built. I tried recreating it from old notes, but you deleted the originals, I finished for him. He let out a painful exhale. Yeah. I leaned against the railing outside the cafe, watching cars pass by, each one representing someone going about their life unaware of the absurd comedy unfolding on my phone. So what exactly do you want from me? I asked. He swallowed hard. I need you to walk me through your architecture. Just the core logic. Enough to get me started. I almost laughed. He wasn't just drowning, he was asking me to throw him the life raft he'd set on fire a year ago. I can pay you, he added quickly. Not a lot, but that won't be necessary, I said. Oh, thank God. Really, I appreciate, because the answer is no. Silence. A long, stunned silence, like someone had unplugged his brain. And no, he finally croaked. Correct. But you don't even know the rate. I don't need to. You burned every bridge in the blueprint. Todd inhaled sharply. You don't understand. If I don't deliver this, I'll lose the contract. You already lost the only thing you needed to deliver anything, I said. Your credibility. Another silence. Longer. He didn't even breathe. Todd, I said softly, I'm not your enemy. You are. And then I hung up. I stood there outside the cafe for a moment, letting the weight of it settle, not guilt, not triumph, just finality. A year ago, I might have helped him despite everything. A year ago, I still believed bridges could be rebuilt if I worked hard enough. But now? Now I understood the truth. Some people don't burn bridges. They blow them up, dance on the ashes, and then wonder why no one will cross back to save them. That evening, I stayed late at my division's office, and wandered into the testing lab we'd built together. Screens glowed with the architecture of the system that would soon roll out to thousands of clients. My team's notes were all over the whiteboards, ideas, sketches, arguments, breakthroughs. It wasn't one person's salvageable project anymore. It was a living organism. A legacy. Mine. I thought about how far I'd come. About the company that underestimated me. About the supervisor who deleted my work. About the man who begged me for help on the phone. About the team who believed in me every day. And as I stood there surrounded by the humming quiet of servers and the clean geometry of code, I realized something simple. The best revenge was not destroying someone else's career. The best revenge was outgrowing the version of myself who ever needed their approval. My old company was fading. Todd was flailing. But I wasn't in their orbit anymore. I had built something stronger than the system Todd deleted. I had built my future. And nothing, no ego, no deletion, no sabotage, could erase that now. A week after Todd's phone call, I found out just how spectacularly his situation had imploded. Our HR director, who used to work with him years ago, stopped by my office with an amused smirk. You'll never guess who tried to apply here, she said, dropping a folder on my desk. I didn't even have to open it. I already knew. Let me guess, I said. His name starts with AT and ends with him deleting my project? She laughed. That's the one. Apparently, after failing to deliver the system he'd promised, Todd had been quietly released from the consulting contract. When he applied to smaller companies, they Googled him and found the article our PR department had published about the success of the platform I'd designed. The same architecture he once declared garbage. He had no defense. He had no portfolio. He had no proof. He had nothing but the memory of the project he destroyed. HR continued flipping through the documents. He listed you as a reference. I burst out laughing, loud enough that two analysts in the hallway turned their heads. He what? He said you two worked closely together, and that you could verify his contributions to the system. I leaned back in my chair, stunned, not at his arrogance, but at his desperation. What did you tell them? I asked. She shrugged casually. We follow a strict policy. Only dates of employment. Nothing more. Meaning, she saved him from the honest truth that would have detonated his entire career in one sentence. I appreciated that. I didn't want to bury him. I just wasn't going to resurrect him. After she left, I stared at his folder for a moment. Not with anger. Not with satisfaction. With closure. I didn't know him a recommendation. I didn't know him a warning. I didn't know him a rescue. He built his own downfall, one petty decision at a time. 2 months later, our VP of Engineering invited me to a private meeting. When I stepped into the conference room, there were 4 people waiting: the VP, the CTO, the CFO, and our CEO. Not exactly a casual gathering. The CEO gestured toward the seat across from him. Close the door, will you? I did. Then he smiled and slid a folder across the table toward me. Inside was a contract. One with a title I'd never expected to see: Director of Systems Architecture. My division. My team. My designs. My leadership. This company, he said, is standing on a foundation you built. And it's time you had the authority to shape the next generation of it. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The VP broke the silence with a grin. Told you he'd have that reaction. The CFO added, we also included a retention bonus. I glanced at the number and had to stop myself from choking. $285,000. The exact offer that had come from the rival company. They hadn't matched it. They'd exceeded it. The CEO folded his hands. We know talent when we see it. And we don't delete it. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't compensation. It wasn't validation. It was recognition. Earned. Deserved. Undeniable. That night, I walked out of the building and looked up at the glowing logo above the entrance. A year ago, I would have stared at it with resentment. Now, it felt like a finish line and a starting point all at once. My future wasn't something someone could delete. It wasn't vulnerable to petty managers or fragile egos. It wasn't dependent on whether someone approved of my work on a given Tuesday afternoon. My future was mine. Built by me. Owned by me. Protected by the one thing no one could ever take away. I knew my value, even when they didn't. And that knowledge had carried me farther than any supervisor's opinion ever could. Todd had tried to erase me. He only ended up erasing himself. I walked to my car, the city humming around me, and I smiled, calmly, quietly, confidently. Some stories end with vengeance. Mine ended with victory.